Okay, today we're going to do a beginner, intermediate, and a little bit more of an advanced flower. Because flowers are so fun and beautiful and they're a very good way to practice your watercolor skills, we're going to start by picking the color flower you want to do. We're just gonna do a very easy wildflower over here. So for me, I'm gonna start with yellow. You want very watered down pigment. Okay, so you want your value a true yellow, but you want it very watered down, almost opaque. And we're just going to start with a few not symmetrical blobs over here. Okay, the more not symmetrical they are, the more real they look when they dry. Sorry, the more real they will look when they're dry. Like I said, I don't want this super pigmented. That's even darker than I was thinking it would come out. Okay, now I'm gonna pick another color. I'm gonna do a little bit of a pink. These are just random blobs, okay? They're little, you're using just the tip of the brush to create petals, which are little tiny strokes, to form a general shape of a flower. Now, when you think of a flower, as it's blooming out, the petals go in different directions. Nothing is symmetrical. I think that's the problem, is sometimes learning how to paint something and paint the image of it. You want to paint this perfectly symmetrical flower, you know, like we did as children with every single petal facing toward the viewer. But think of this as just the outline of the petal. The petals could be going in different directions. Some of these flowers are facing towards the sky. Some of them are facing towards the viewer. Some of them are facing to the side. So if I was doing one to the side, I'd have the petals go more this way. If it was facing down, I'd have the petals go that way. If it was facing up, I would have the petals go more like that. If it was facing directly towards the viewer, you could do all of the petals like this, as if it was facing directly toward the viewer. But I think it looks more natural when you do them in a more random shape. Okay, we're gonna work on the stems. So just get a nice green color, whatever kind of green you like. I'm gonna mix a little bit of green, a little bit of brown, and a little bit of yellow. Okay. Now it's kind of fun to have the green just barely touch into the color of the flower, because it bleeds up into it a tiny bit and gives the appearance of the bottom part of the stem that's connecting with the petals. As you can see there, it looks pretty, I think, as that green bleeds. Now this is a very beginner way to do a bouquet of flowers. Anyone can do this. And they look very pretty when they dry. I think it'd be fun to cut your watercolor paper into squares and paint each one on one of the rectangles. And then you could cut them out, maybe hole punch it and make it as a little thank you tag or thank you card. Now remember, if you want to do a leaf, when they're this small, you're just going to use the tip of your brush and just barely tap it on there. Okay, right there we got a little bit too much water. You can see how that's bleeding. Okay, let's move on to an intermediate flower. I'm also gonna start with yellow. So I want a very opaque, kind of see-through almost, actually, transparent. Let's start transparent yellow. Okay, and we're gonna do petals that are shaped like a fat teardrop. Now I am doing wet on dry. I did not wet my paper before this, okay? So there's a fatter teardrop shape. Then I'm gonna dab my pigment, get a very, very pigmented tip of my brush and put it right to the inside and give it just a little bit of a dark center right there. I'm gonna let it naturally bleed upwards. I'm gonna go back to my original kind of transparent yellow. I'm gonna do another petal right here. Now this one is almost touching it, but not quite. And I'm gonna do another fat teardrop. Okay. Now wherever you drag your brush and lift up is where the densest part of your color is going to be. So say I'm coloring in here and I'm shading and I pull up on this side, I'm gonna have a dense color right there. So I want my denser spot to be towards the center. So I'm gonna drag my brush back there and lift up. And I'm also going to get a tiny bit more of a brownish yellow pigment and dab it in the middle. And over here again, kind of repigment that. Okay, I'm going to repeat this process with all of my petals. Now the more each petal is unique, the more real this flower will look. So you don't want every petal the exact same shape. You are bringing them to a point here and you are going out, but you don't need every petal the same exact shape. I'm gonna get my darker pigment. Whoop. Oh, got really dark. Okay. And let's do a couple more. And maybe last one right here. Okay. I'm gonna lift up over here so that my dense color's right here. If you feel like you have too much water, dry your brush on a paper towel, press down and drag up to the tip, and it soaks up a lot of that. I feel like there's a little bit too much water in this one, so I am going to drag it to the point and lift up. Okay, but I do want some pigment still right there. So I do want it darker in the middle right there. Same with this one. Okay, now, as the petals dry, if you want to add some detail, you can. So this part of the painting, you want your paintbrush to be not too wet. It is important that the ratio of water to pigment not be too great or too little. And the only way to really achieve that is through practice. So we're gonna get some yellow color on here. It's not too wet, right? This petal I did first, so it's probably the most dry. And I'm gonna just do a couple of little teeny lines down the center to give the appearance of some detail. And I'm going to do that on every petal. Now remember, you don't want them to be exactly the same. You want it to be a little bit different, which is what makes it look more real. Oops, this one's a little wet still, so it's gonna fan out and bleed. It takes a lot of practice to learn how to mix the water and the pigment ratio. So don't feel discouraged if that takes you a long time to learn. I feel like the only way to really learn is to practice. Okay, we're gonna let that dry. We're gonna add a little bit of a greenery around it. These green leaves can be a little bit fatter, obviously, than these ones. So we're gonna start with the tip of our brush, just the tip. Then you're gonna make a big, fat press down and lift up to the tip again inside those petals. Let's try it over here. Tip, press, and lift up. Maybe another one right here. Tip, press, and lift up. Okay. We're going to move on to our little bit more advanced flower. I have sketched this one. You probably can't see it, but I have sketched the round center and a few of the petals. And this flower is facing this direction, as if it's blooming towards this corner. So I can see the petals coming down this way. As they go up here, they get smaller and smaller, and then I can't see any of the petals behind this center piece. So they're short and they get longer as they come down to here, and it is blooming in this direction. Now to start, I want kind of a periwinkle center. So I'm going to mix a little bit of blue and lavender together to make a periwinkle color. This is still wet on dry at this time. I'm going to color in this part so that it can start drying as I work on my petals. Okay, now each of my petals, I want to be distinctly different from the other ones. So I'm going to work around my flower, giving enough time for each petal that I did to dry. So I'm gonna start with this one back here. Let's say I just wanna add like a little bit of a pink undertone. So I'm gonna make this one pink. I'm gonna let that one dry so that it doesn't bleed too much into the other ones. And I'm gonna do a couple more over here. Some pink here, maybe some pink here. To let these dry in between. Okay, let's see, we probably could do this one too. All right, okay, slurp up some of this water just so there's not too much water in there. We want those ones to dry. Okay, some of the other petals might have a little bit more pigment in them. Maybe they're a little bit more of a peach color. Let's mix a peach color, which is pink and some yellow. All right, I'm gonna get a peach color going. Now you don't want too much water, but you don't want too little water either, or it won't work. So learning to master the ratio of water to pigment really helps with your watercolor. Okay, so I'm gonna paint this leaf. This one at some point is going to be curled over, so I will work on those details later. But right now, I just want my base tone in. And I want the darkest part to be up here, so I'm gonna drag and lift up towards that end. All right, let's see. Let's do this one. Let's do this one. Maybe this one. Being careful not too much. I don't want to get too close to the other pink one. I do want them touching, but I don't want it to bleed just yet. Okay. All right. Now I'm just gonna vary this color just a smidge so that it's not too different from these two colors, maybe just slightly more pigmented. And I'm gonna fill in the rest of my flowers. Petals. This one petal right here has a little bit of a wobbly edge. Okay. These petals each come kind of from a point and get thicker as they go out and then come to a point again. If you feel more comfortable sketching this before you start painting it, that's fine. I myself sketched this one out just so I had an idea of where I wanted my petals to go. Now we're gonna come back to the center because the rest of this part's gonna have to dry for just a moment. Oh, I got one up here I need to do really quick, sorry. Okay. All right, let's let these kind of dry for a sec while we work on the center again. Now, up in the center, we have some fuzzy colors coming up, and then we're gonna have some dots around the sides. So, in order for me to layer this, I want this to be slightly darker and a slightly different shade. So still kind of sticking with periwinkle and purple. I'm going to layer these together and make a little bit of a darker periwinkle color. And I'm going to add some fuzzies to the top. And I don't want them perfectly symmetrical, and I don't want to destroy all of that base color. So I'm going to leave some of that base color as I just add these fuzzies in. It's like I said, it's blooming this way towards this side of the paper. So as that dries, it's gonna give us the effect that there's fuzzies on the top of that flower. Now down here, there's some dots. This is where it gets tricky. I am going to use a little bit of white acrylic paint to add some dots. Without destroying, again, entirely that base color. We still want some of that base lavender. Okay, I'm gonna let this dry for a second now. We'll come back to that and add a little bit more detail. Let's go back to our petals. Now this is layering wet on dry. This is a very effective way to get depth and dimension to your petals. So let's go back to that peach color that we had kind of in the beginning. A pinkish peach color. I'm gonna go to my peach petals and I'm going to make sure that there's definition right here because this is where this petal curls over. So I'm just lightly kind of outlining the petal, just barely. And I'm going to add just a little bit of lines down the center. To give some detail. I'm using my peach color and kind of following the peach petals. Keep in mind which direction these petals are falling. Okay, I'm gonna move on to maybe a little bit more of a pink one. Gonna layer some pink in here. Kind of follow an outline. This one's got a little bit of the purple from our center, that's okay. this one is kind of underneath this lavender petal on top of it. So I'm going to give it a little bit of a darker shadow color right underneath this petal to show that it's shadowed by the one above it. Okay. As you really learn to master watercolor, you will learn how to use your brush to massage the paper to add shading to each petal. So you push down and drag to lift up some of the color and the water and the pigment. You want a clean, dry brush to do this. If you want to soften any edges, you can use a clean, almost dry brush, barely any water on it, and you can massage the edges of these lines and they will blend gently into the paper and not be so harsh. As so. Just a tiny bit. Oop, that's a little dark for me. I don't know if I want it that dark. Okay. I am going to use my brush with a little water on it to massage this into the paper and nicely blend it out toward the edge. See how nice that looks? Okay, we're gonna do that over here again. So a little bit more pigment on the ends. Using the edge of your brush and massaging it into the paper gives you a lot of control over how you blend your petals. Giving each petal a tiny little pointy tip too, maybe pointing in different directions, helps the petals look more realistic also. Okay, I want this brush almost dry, not totally, but almost dry, and I'm gonna soften up these lines, massaging gently into the paper and blending it. Okay, I apologize. My camera stopped recording without me knowing it. But I have started to add some tiny little lines as details onto some of these petals. This line to me is a little bit too blunt, so I'm going to massage it out. I still want that darkened tip. I just don't want it so blunt. So I'm going to use a damp brush, not too much water, hardly any water, it's almost dry. I'm just gonna soften that line, just like that. So the tip is still dark, but now it's not as blunt. And I was using a periwinkle color to add very, very skinny lines down these petals and a couple going out in either direction. and that detail helps the flower look much more real. Now, as your other petals dry, you'll be able to add details to those as well. These petals are not quite dry enough for me. Remember, you don't want everything symmetrical and the same, so allow it to have some differences. And that is our tutorial today on some beginner, intermediate, and advanced flowers. I hope you enjoyed it. Give it a try, tag me in your posts, and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe as it helps me grow my channel. Thank you so much.